It's no secret that I'm not the biggest Adobe fan, even though Photoshop is like my lifeblood. It's one of the first programs I got good at and is largely responsible for me being here today. I'm so happy to not be using it anymore. And God, when I see things like what's happening right now, I'm more thankful than ever because it honestly kind of feels like Adobe's falling apart. They have a monopoly, they've won their space, and everything since then's been quite chaotic. I think we need to talk about this most recent announcement because there's some important details here. And honestly, I think people are both less outraged and more outraged than they probably should be about what's going on in this instance. Oh, one more thing. Since I originally filmed this, Adobe responded, and we'll talk a lot about Adobe's response near the end. So watch till then, or if you just want to see Adobe's feelings, skip to the end, I guess. Anyways, this tweet. So, am I reading this right? I can't use Photoshop unless I'm okay with you having full access to anything I create with it, including NDA work. This is a response to updated terms of service where they changed sections 2.2 and 4.1. Section 2.2 is about our access to your content. We may access, view, or listen to your content as defined in section 4.1 content, which is things you create in the program, through both automated and manual methods, but only in limited ways and only as permitted by law. They give examples here, but we'll go into those in a bit. The important piece here is that they are going to have automated and manual methods accessing the things you're making in Photoshop. Yeah. But if we go to 4.1, this is where people are getting even more scared. Content means any text, information, communication, or material, such as audio files, video files, electronic documents, or images that you upload, import, use in their stuff. We do not review all content uploaded by the services and software, but we may use available technologies, vendors, or processors, including manual review, to screen for certain types of illegal content. It's not a bad thing that they're doing this, specifically because they do host a cloud platform, but we'll get to that in a minute, because the thing that people are scared of is 4.2, solely for the purpose of operating or improving the services or software. I'm going to ask you, wipe this sentence out of your brain, or this part of the sentence, and just read what's next. You grant us a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free, sub-licensable, license to use, reproduce, publicly display, distribute, modify, create derivative works based on, publicly perform, and translate the content. That's brute. That is a massive reach for Adobe to have a non-exclusive, royalty-free, sub-licensable license to use your content for whatever they could theoretically want. They say it's solely for the purposes of operating or improving the services and software. But you know what they could say is improving the services and software? AI training. Technically speaking, by the words of this license, as stands here, they legally can use all of the things you create in Photoshop to train their Photoshop AI to make Adobe better and to effectively use your work without paying you, which is funny because they're also one of the most expensive options in the space. We'll be comparing them to other options as we go along, don't you worry. 4.3 is an important piece too, because Adobe's claiming that you as the user, business or personal, still retain all rights and ownership of your content. They don't claim any ownership. They just have a license to it. So it's not like they own your content. It's they have the rights to use it theoretically however they want. We need to dive in here because there is so much to talk about, think about, and to be frank, be worried about here because this is terrifying. As a creative, the idea of anybody just having access to all these things is hilarious, especially when you consider how hard it is to get an Adobe logo from Adobe. I have this thread I made a while back talking about how hard it is to find brand assets. Adobe is one of the worst. If you just grab their old logo on like Wikipedia, cool. But once I find the brand assets, it's not actually the branding guidelines, which is what I just went to. So I went to the wrong place. It's the marketing hub, which doesn't even come up there. I have to scroll so far to find that. And then in here, eventually loads. Oh, they have a new upgraded marketing hub. I guarantee it's no better. There used to be a PDF here you could get to. The getting started resources portfolio. Are you kidding? It's so insulting how hard it is to just get their logo. And then you end up in this PDF eventually, the Marketing Hub reference logo. And you can't get this until you sign up for Adobe's Marketing Hub. So it's like 17 steps, a sign up and approval await, and then and only then do you have access to an SVG for their damn logo. So if I want to put their logo in this thumbnail, which I'm certain I did, that was either ripped from like Wikipedia, made by somebody by hand, or stolen or recreated by me, because Adobe does not let me have access to their fucking logo. Yet they're asking for the legal rights to everything I ever make in their software. It's just the contradiction there feels so funny to me that they won't let me use their logo, but they have the rights to use literally everything I ever create using their program. Like, that's insane. Yeah, and funny enough, somebody just pointed out in chat, the PDF's a link to a login to a protected page to download the assets. In order to download those, I then have to accept all of the terms that we are discussing here. What? It's insane. It's actually insane. A good thing you can find the Adobe logo on SVGL. Yeah. By the way, svgl.app, great way to get logos for anything. If you just need like the Chrome logo or like TypeScript, you just go here, hit copy, svg, tsx, jsx, download to. Super, super handy. Really recommend using that for grabbing logos because companies like Adobe don't like to help you with it at all. I need to do a little pushback though, because it's unfair to just sit here and say that like all of this is super evil and brand new. At the very least, it's not brand new. We can look at old licenses. If we go to 4.1, this is back in February 2022. Supposedly this license was as written March 16th, 2020, effective April 16th, 2020. So 4 years ago. This is as far as I felt like reasonably going back. Solely for the purpose of operating or improving the services and software, when you upload content to the service or software, you grant us a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free, sub-licensable, and transferable license to use. It's the exact same. Like if I copy paste, it doesn't say upload anymore, but it's basically the exact same wording. You grant us a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free sub-license. So not the exact frame. You grant us a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free sub-licensable. Yeah, it's royalty-free, comma, sub-licensable. They removed a comma. Basically, no difference between these from 2020 to now. So this isn't just some crazy new thing. A lot of why people are upset right now is that, realistically speaking, this sounds like an AI play. Like they want to be able to train on AI. Thankfully, we've seen a couple employees come out and say otherwise. So this is somebody complaining on Reddit. And Mike Chambers, I don't want to put him on blast because clearly he's out here trying to like be realistic as an employee. This doesn't have anything to do with training AI models. The insights obtained through content analysis will not be used to recreate your content or lead to identifying any personal information. This is a very clear call out in their machine learning FAQ. As well as in the terms of service, they specify it solely for the purpose of operating or improving the services and software. Again, this feels like one of those preambles that can be debated in court for years. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this isn't going to include AI. But it seems like this employee believes that this, specifically because it follows up with examples, does not include that. Like the example here is, we may sublicense our right to the content to our service providers or others to do things like scan to make sure the content isn't illegal. So if they're using a third-party service for making sure images aren't inappropriate, the license is so they can do that. But the debate here is really reasonable to have because, again, that third-party service that they're using could be an AI training solution. Like they could be licensing to Midjourney or OpenAI your photos without your like approval for that. Examples don't actually necessarily matter. It's nice they're including them because it gives us context on what they are thinking, but this could be used to reach incredibly far. From Mike though, given these sections are not new, what parts are you particularly concerned about? Also, I've started a thread internally to see if we can get a page that explains the terms of service in a more human, less legal terminology. And they call it that they work for Adobe. Thankful that they showed up and called this all out. I want to go to Scott Belsky, who is the founder of Behance, that if I recall was acquired by Adobe. So he also replied here. While the team addresses your legal question, I can clearly state that Adobe does not train any Gen AI models on customers' content, and we obviously have tight security around any form of access to customers' content. So a company that stores cloud documents and assets for customers, there's probably circumstances like indexing to help you search your docs, updating components used for CC libraries to act across your docs, among others, where the company's terms of service allow for some degree of access. Again, fair point, because you probably are using some amount of their cloud stuff. If you're on Adobe, like they call it Creative Cloud for a reason, you're keeping a lot of shit there. It's nice to be able to search in it, but in order to do the searching, they might have to train something to get that metadata. But in order to do that, they need some amount of license to your content. Makes logical sense, but at the same time, he's getting roasted, and for what I would argue are good reasons. The word probably is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, Scott. Being high up at Adobe, you shouldn't have to be responding to concerns with probably. You should have definitive answers. Adobe loves to keep shitting the bed. I will say it is nice that multiple employees have come out, clearly without formal permission internally to do such. Like, it doesn't feel like Adobe silences their employees. Like, for example, Nintendo. The thought of a Nintendo employee coming out and saying anything about the legality of emulators almost feels funny to me. Like, that's just never going to happen because Nintendo locks down what their employees are and aren't able to say publicly. Seems like Adobe doesn't give a shit. And honestly, respect to them for it. This is increasingly rare in modern times. Like, let your employees that love your company and love your product represent you. Even if in this case, people are still pushing back, at least we're talking to a human and not some corporate brand Adobe account that uses a logo that I don't have the rights to touch. Like, insane. I understand the concerns here. I also understand the memes here because people have been memeing this pretty hard. My favorite so far, to Affinity and beyond. For those who don't know, I'm a bit of an Affinity simp. So if I open up affinity.serif, they just got acquired by Canva, and I haven't taken the time to look at Canva's licensing yet, but I did look at Affinity's. The reason I bring them up is multifold. One of the reasons is because of how much cheaper it is. $70 for life. You pay for it once, you have it forever. If you want to get all of Affinity's programs for all operating systems, $165 for life. And you just have this forever. You know, like the way Adobe used to work, where you would buy the disc and you'd have it. If you wanted the new version, you could, but if you didn't, it was fine. Yeah, dope. I use Affinity for all of my thumbnails. If you're looking at videos on this channel, every single thumbnail was done in Affinity. There's also Photopea if you want to be cheap, because Photopea is free. It's an in-browser Photoshop clone that is also super, super solid. Easily can recommend it. But yeah, Affinity is my go-to. It's what I've used for all of my content for a while. It's great value. We already see people in chat, like one of the best $165 you've ever spent. Heard a lot of good stuff about Affinity. Was Theo that turned you onto it? Yep, absolutely. You get free updates for non-majors. So I bought Affinity Photo 1 like over a decade ago, and they gave me a 50% off for Photo 2, which was dope. More on Affinity though, because as much as I love this meme and I think everybody should be at least considering making a move to Affinity, we can talk about their license and how it differs, because I scrolled through here for a bit. I looked at every instance of the word content, which there are quite a few of. They have a similar definition: text, documents, fonts, graphics, images, video, audio, all the same. But their licensing with it is much, much less scary. When you use the Serif software to display or access content, you acknowledge that the content may be owned by third parties, must be protected by copyright and or other intellectual property rights, and it must be subject to conditions of use. Other than as expressly set out in this license, you are not granted any rights to use such content, and no representation is made that any content will continue to be made available to you. This is about their content and about third parties that have plugins for Affinity. They're not saying anything about your content and their access to it. Their licensing here is exclusively about third-party stuff that you would be using in Affinity. That is fine. It's important to acknowledge the difference here where Affinity doesn't have a cloud, so they're not storing your assets, which means the viability and even the need of having that content doesn't exist for them. At no point does Affinity get my content. The closest thing is if I take a screenshot of a bug and then I share that in Affinity's forums. Other than that, they never see my content at all, which means they don't have to use it for anything to make a better user experience. They don't have to make it searchable. They don't have to do anything in that regard. But it also means they have no liability, because the legal responsibility Affinity has is much lower because they're not storing your content. Adobe is, which means necessarily they have to do a bit more with it in order to make sure you're following the law. Important things to be considerate of. But also in chat, people are making fair points. Access isn't a license though. iCloud or Google Drive have to control legal stuff too, but they don't license it. Also very fair. Apparently Eva denies Affinity network access at a device level and a router level and has no issues with the service. Yeah. Exactly, because it's not a service, it's an app that you install. Fundamental difference there. But as such, Affinity just has no real reason to care. But also, an important piece is the proliferation of Adobe stuff. The fact that Adobe software is so popular, and if you're looking at something that's fraud, like if you're looking at a fake dollar, there's a statistically really high chance that they made it in Photoshop. Except for that's not the case, because when you try and put a dollar bill in Adobe software, there's a very high chance it errors out. Adobe Photoshop dollar error. I am unable to open currency images in Photoshop. I cannot open this in Photoshop. I get the following error. The application does not support editing of banknote images. I saw this originally because somebody, I think they were working at The Verge, was trying to make an image that had a bunch of dollars in it, just a pile of money, so they could use that as the banner image for a blog post. And Adobe wouldn't let them export it because it detected money as the thing being edited. And in order to try and stay out of legal stuff, Photoshop just errors whenever you try to edit something that it thinks is a banknote image. So you actually can't make fake money in Adobe products because they've hard-coded checks to make sure everything you import doesn't look enough like a dollar. So if you ever wondered why Adobe is so much slower than Affinity, it's because they have checks like this making sure you can't Photoshop money, which is just funny. But also shows that this type of intrusive, we control what you can and can't do stuff is not new to Adobe. They've been doing this for a while. And that's the big pushback I would have on this post here. Nothing that this person is complaining about is new. Sure, it's new in the sense that the updated terms mention and call out sections 2.2 and 4.1, but as I showed before, and I'll show again here, these didn't change that much. There's a bit more wording, but it's really just the example here. If you trimmed out the example, this is basically the same terms. So people are freaking out here for not new reasons. Fun thing from Ronan here, you can't actually open images that you got on Adobe stock. Yeah, if you got a pile of money picture on Adobe stock and then you try to open it in Photoshop, it will error out, which is so funny to me. But that's the state of these things. It's just not they're trying so hard to be compliant that they end up doing questionable things in their license. I will make one more very bold statement, which is that if we ever prove that Adobe was using your content in a way that we reasonably wouldn't want them to, be it for AI or relicensing and selling without your permission, the speed at which that would blow up is hilarious. I don't think Adobe could take the brand hit if they were to do that. So I really doubt they will. Okay, I promised you the Adobe response. Let's go through this really quick because it is important and it has only ruffled feathers even more and caused this to explode beyond belief. From Adobe. We recently made an update to our terms of use with the goal of providing more clarity on a few specific areas. We've received a number of questions resulting from this update. We wanted to provide some clarity. We remain committed to transparency, protecting the rights of our creators, and enabling our customers to do their best work. The focus of this update was to be clearer about the improvements to our moderation process that we have in place. Given the explosion of generative AI and our commitment to responsible innovation, we've added more human moderation to our content submissions review processes. So this kind of aligns with what I was saying before. They're almost certainly doing this not for AI stuff, even if the license technically permits it. It seems like their goal here was to beef up moderation. And the part they're calling out here with more human moderators, there's no way they're hiring those. It's very unlikely Adobe is staffing up. What they're probably doing is using third-party services that have hired a lot of those humans. So if they're using these services, they might need to be clear with the license that it's permitting them to send your assets and the things in the cloud to those third parties in order to review them and make sure they're appropriate. Whether or not this is good is something we'll all have opinions on. I know I certainly do. But at the very least, it seems like their goal here was being clearer about what they're doing with things for external moderation. And again, to be clear, it allowed this before. This license change isn't new. They just added some examples and clarified the wording a little bit. To be clear, Adobe requires a limited license to access content solely for the purposes of operating or improving the services and software, and to enforce our terms and comply with the law, such as to protect against abusive content. Again, seems like they're really emphasizing the moderation side here. Access is needed for Adobe applications and services to perform the functions they are designed to and used to deliver some of the most innovative cloud-based features such as Photoshop neural filters, liquid mode, and remove background. Here is where I start to have really strong opinions because they had just said this is for moderation. But if they're using this access for Adobe applications and services to perform the functions they're designed to, that sounds like they need that data in order to make these things work, which means they need that data in order to train these things. This one tweet here, this confirms they're definitely training on your inputs, but not for generation, right? Because that's what this felt like to me is they're not training generative AI necessarily right now on your stuff, but this sounds like they're absolutely training other AI features like these filters, the remove background automatically stuff, which is all AI still, just not generative. Yeah, no, I'm not vibing. This is the tweet that made me want to add this extra bit because I have a lot less trust after that. Adobe may also use technologies and other processes, including escalation for manual and human review, to screen for certain types of illegal content like CSAM or other abusive content or behavior. Our commitment to our customers has not changed. Adobe did not train Firefly generative AI models on customer content. This seems like the hill they are dying on, which is that their generative AI thing did not use your data, but their other non-generative AI things, their moderation, all of that has full right to your data. As they say, Firefly generative AI models are trained on a data set of licensed content like Adobe stock and public domain content. Adobe will never assume ownership of a customer's work. Adobe hosts content to enable customers to use our apps and services. Customers own their content, and Adobe does not assume any ownership of customer work. That's another good call out. They have a license to it, but not ownership of it. But it still feels like they're playing into the people who are upset using the wrong words rather than coming out and formally saying, we're not training anything on your data. We appreciate our customers who reach out to ask these questions, which has given us an opportunity to clarify our terms and our commitments. We will be clarifying the terms of use acceptance customers see when opening applications. Feels like the things people are worried about, the things people are saying, and the things Adobe's actually doing wrong here aren't super aligned, and it's annoying because Adobe definitely has too much license to your stuff, and they're not being clear enough about what they are and aren't using it for. This is a mess. Curious what you guys think. Are you done with Adobe? Are you going to move to Affinity with me? Or are you going to stick through and keep using them because they're the best deal? Or just because you need Lightroom and nothing else has that? Until next time, peace.